My family refused to help me with my venture because they invested in my cousin, but now that it failed and my company is successful, they call my business the family business. I'm Sakari, I'm 34 years old, a man, and I grew up in a family that, well, lived comfortably. My dad had several businesses spread across the city, real estate, retail, and a few more. My mom owned several buildings, yes, plural. My grandparents, although not as wealthy, were the first entrepreneurs who managed to garner enough success to give my parents their initial push. There's an expectation that if you're born into this family, you'll either inherit something and not ruin it, or start your own empire. Naturally, I wanted to go with the latter. I wasn't a naive kid dreaming of opening a beach shack in the Bahamas. Not that there's anything wrong with that. I had a plan, a solid one in my opinion: cybersecurity. Ever since I was 14 and accidentally hacked into my school's server to change my arrest record, I discovered I had a talent for computers. I went to college, majored in computer science, and spent hours obsessing over encryption, data breaches, and programming. After graduating, I realized that cybersecurity isn't just an interesting career, it's also lucrative. Every company needs it. Every bank, every hospital. It's like selling umbrellas in a world where data breaches are always raining down. I had a vision, a potential customer base, and a detailed business plan that I thought would impress anyone. But here was the problem. I needed money to start. Lots of money. I wasn't asking for millions, okay? Just enough to rent an office space, hire a small team, and invest in startup software and hardware. I could have started with less, sure, but I had this very clear picture in my head of what the company would look like. One morning, I approached my parents. We were sitting in the living room, and I pitched my idea. I had graphs, market research, and passion. I asked them for a loan. I didn't want a gift. I didn't want free money. It was a loan I would repay with interest once the business took off. They said, "Zach, we love you, but we don't think you have what it takes to run a business." They didn't mean it. My dad sighed as he said it, as if it physically hurt him to reject me. My mom gave me only of those pitying looks moms give when they think you're being adorably naive. My dad explained that being a good programmer doesn't automatically make you a good entrepreneur. Running a company involves, well, running it, managing accounts, employees, investors' losses, all those boring, no-fun parts. And according to them, I just didn't have that spark. For them, investing in me wasn't investing, it was throwing money away. I'm not going to lie, that hurt. At first I was angry, very angry, but still I didn't want to give up on my dream. A month after my parents rejected my funding request, my cousin Bernard was getting married. A big lavish wedding, 3 days of events, champagne fountains, all the spectacle. At one point, I was standing with my parents near the buffet table when Bernard approached us. He greeted my parents, shook my dad's hand, and then said, "Uncle, Auntie, thank you again for believing in me and helping me with funding for my hotel business. I couldn't have done it without you." I stood there, staring at Bernard as if he'd just confessed to being a time traveler. My parents laughed nervously, said something polite, and quickly changed the subject. I had asked for funding. They said no, but Bernard got financing for a hotel, a damn hotel. I left with a lame excuse because I felt betrayed. Not because they financed Bernard, I mean good for him, I guess, but because they wouldn't do the same for me. They trusted Bernard. But me, their own son? Apparently, it wasn't worth the risk. At some point, my grandmother found me sitting there. "Sakari, what are you doing here? Why aren't you inside enjoying the wedding?" And there's something about grandmothers, you can't lie to them, you just can't. So I told her everything. She just let me get it off my chest. Then she said something I'll never forget. "Sakari, sometimes people see potential in others because they see a version of themselves in them. Your father may see a younger version of himself in Bernard, but that doesn't mean you're not capable. You're different, and being different isn't bad. It's just different." She squeezed my hand and added, "You're smart, you work hard. Someday you're going to build something amazing. It'll just be on your own terms." I know it sounds like a lot of cliche phrases, but that was exactly what I needed at that moment. The day after the wedding, I was still in this weird emotional haze, half motivated by what my grandmother said, but also half devastated. I was sitting on my couch when my phone rang. It was my grandfather. Now, my grandfather isn't the type of person who calls just to chat, so naturally I freaked out. I asked him if everything was okay, and he said everything was fine and that he just wanted me to come see him. I just said, Okay, Grandpa, I'll be there in 2 hours. When I got to his house, my grandmother opened the door and gave me a warm smile. Come in, Sakuri. Your grandfather is in his study. He was sitting in his chair when I walked in, but he immediately got up and hugged me, and at that moment I started to relax a little. My grandfather wasted no time making small talk. He said, Your grandmother told me what happened at the wedding and how you feel about your business plans. Oh, so that's what it was about. I nodded, trying to maintain a neutral expression. He continued, I want you to know something. I started my first business with nothing but an old van and a loan from my uncle. It wasn't easy, and everyone thought I was going to fail, but I didn't. And you know why? I shook my head. Because someone believed in me. Sometimes just one person can make all the difference. Then he reached into his desk drawer, pulled out a checkbook, wrote something down, and handed it to me. Now, I'm not going to tell you the exact amount, but let's just say it wasn't pocket money. It wasn't everything I needed to launch my cybersecurity company, but it was enough to get started, enough to make a real difference. I stared at the check for what seemed like 5 full minutes. Finally, I managed to say, Grandpa, I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything, he said. This isn't just money, it's trust. I'm investing in you. I was trying my hardest not to lose my composure. But my grandfather simply stood up, came over, hugged me, and said, Make us proud. On the way home, I kept staring at the check. It wasn't just money. It was proof that someone believed in me. After getting the startup funding from my grandfather, I knew I had to be smart with every penny. I didn't splurge on fancy desks or modern office chairs. We started small. I contacted my 2 best friends, Adam and Luis. We pooled what little we had saved and rented a tiny, cramped office in the most dangerous part of town. But hey, it was ours. Those first 2 years were brutal. We worked 14 to 16-hour days, barely got any time off on weekends, and survived on instant noodles and vending machine snacks. Luis was jumping from one call to another. Adam was buried in code, and I, well, was doing everything at once. Our first big client was a mid-sized financial company that had just been hacked. We managed to repair their systems, recover their data, and prevent future breaches. That project gave us enough money to move to a slightly better office. Little by little, we started gaining traction. Word of mouth began to spread, and we began to land bigger clients. About 4 years later, we hit our first sliver. We had enough revenue to consider expanding. We opened our second office in a nearby city, and a year later, we opened a third in another major city. By then, we were no longer just a startup. We were a real company. Around that time, we also started a cybersecurity consulting firm. It seemed like the natural next step. Companies weren't just asking us to fix breaches, they also wanted to proactively prevent them. And let me tell you, consulting money feels different. About 5 years after starting the business, I was finally in a position to pay my grandparents. I drove to their house, cashed a check, and told them, "This is yours with interest." But I didn't stop there. These 2 people had given me everything when no one else did, so I bought them a new house. Nothing ridiculously extravagant, but cozy, comfortable, and in a neighborhood they had always loved. Seeing them walk through their new home, pointing out little details they liked, was one of the most rewarding moments of my life. While our cybersecurity business thrived, Bernard's Hotel didn't. The pandemic completely crushed the industry, and Bernard's Hotel never fully recovered. Apparently, my parents gave him even more money to help him out. But despite their efforts, and I truly feel bad for him, the hotel eventually closed. So last weekend, we were celebrating my grandparents' 50th wedding anniversary. Because they are literally the reason I have everything I have today, I wanted to make sure I continued to thank them for what they did. I spared no expense. I rented a beautiful hotel ballroom, hired catering, arranged a live band, and invited basically every friend, family member, and even some old neighbors I hadn't seen in years. Honestly, planning this event felt more emotional than some of the biggest business deals I've ever closed. The party was spectacular. Everyone was dressed up, the food was amazing, and my grandparents were so happy, which was what mattered. But then my parents came into the picture. At some point during the evening, I overheard my dad talking to one of his old friends. When his friend said he must be proud of me, he responded by talking about family values and how their support and guidance had set me on the right path. He also mentioned how it's practically a family business now. Excuse me? I hadn't heard wrong. As the night went on, I kept overhearing snippets of conversations where my parents painted themselves as the backbone of my success. We always knew he would do something great. We supported him every step of the way. That's what we do as a family. We lift each other up. And then, to top it off, my dad said, "It's all thanks to the family's initial support." Look, I'm not saying I needed my parents to get down on their knees in front of me or apologize with tears in their eyes or anything like that. But for them to take credit for something they actively refused to support, that really rubbed me the wrong way. I tried to enjoy the rest of the evening, but I was really angry. So I changed my speech. Originally, I had planned something simple, a heartfelt tribute to Grandma and Grandpa. But after everything I heard that night, I knew I couldn't let it go. I started with a light tone. I made a few jokes, mentioned how their marriage was older than the internet, and talked about the love and respect they always showed each other. But then I got serious. And here's the part of my speech. You see, Grandma and Grandpa didn't just build a life together, they built a legacy. A legacy of love, trust, and most importantly, faith in people. When I had a dream and everyone else shut the door in my face, they opened it. They didn't just believe in my idea, they believed in me. And everything I have today, I owe to their faith in me when no one else had it. I paused. My parents were looking at me with forced smiles on their faces. So tonight, I want to propose a toast to Grandma and Grandpa, the only two people who believed in me when no one else did. This success is theirs and no one else's. Grandma was crying. Grandpa nodded with that proud, calm smile of his. And my parents? They were smiling weakly, their teeth clenched. About 15 minutes after the speech, my dad found me near the dessert table. He was basically yelling at me. "What the heck was that speech? You were trying to humiliate us in front of everyone!" "Humiliate you?" "I just told the truth. You didn't believe in me, but Grandma and Grandpa did." My mom chimed in. "You didn't have to air our family problems in front of everyone. You made us look so bad." At that point, I was already biting my tongue, trying not to explode. But then my dad said, "You act like we haven't done anything for you. We gave you a good life, a good education. How dare you make us look like the villains in your little success story?" I didn't yell at first, but my voice definitely got louder. "You know what? You didn't believe in me. You had the money, but you gave it to Bernard for his hotel without even thinking twice. And when it failed, you gave him even more. But when I came to you with my idea, you told me I wasn't the business type." At that moment, I realized the room had fallen silent. The guests were staring. My cousin Bernard, the one with the failed hotel, was sitting uncomfortably in a corner, drinking his beverage as if he wanted to disappear. My dad pointed his finger at me and said, "You're being ungrateful." And I replied, completely losing control, "Ungrateful? Why, no, I'm not ungrateful. I'm simply stating aloud what everyone already knows." My chest felt tight, my face was hot, and I realized I had just caused a scene at what was supposed to be a celebration for my grandparents. I looked around and saw my grandmother looking at me with a soft, sad expression. Not disappointed, just sad. My grandfather had his arm around her as if trying to comfort her. That's when the guilt hit me. I didn't say another word. I just turned around, left the ballroom, and didn't even grab my coat. I got into my car, slammed the door, and sat there for a few minutes, staring at the steering wheel, trying to calm down. I didn't sleep that night. The argument kept playing over and over in my head. The next morning, I got a text from my grandmother. "Zachary, we love you so much. Please don't feel bad about last night, we understand." But that didn't really make me feel better. I've been thinking about it a lot, Reddit. Did I go too far? Did I ruin a night that was supposed to be for my grandparents? Update 1. I think it's fair to give you an update since you've been so kind to comment on my post. I thought things would calm down after that night. I thought maybe we would all reflect a little and then have a proper adult conversation. But no, my parents decided to go nuclear. It started small. A cousin texted me something like, "Hey, Zach, is it true you manipulated Grandma and Grandpa into giving you money?" That's what my uncle said. At first I laughed because, come on, it sounded ridiculous. But then the calls kept coming. An aunt messaged me on Facebook, saying she was disappointed in how I used my grandparents' emotions to get money from them, so I called my grandma right away because I needed to know if she was okay. She said, "Don't worry about what others say. We know the truth, and that's all that matters." Honestly, she's the sweetest woman in the world. And hearing her voice calmed me down a bit. But I couldn't ignore the fact that my parents were out there spinning this twisted narrative. I'm not someone who likes confrontation, despite what my meltdown at the anniversary might suggest. But this time, I couldn't let it go. I called my parents and asked, "What the heck are you telling everyone? Why are people calling me saying I manipulated Grandma and Grandpa?" To this, my mom replied, "Well, didn't you cry with them? You made them feel bad for you. Isn't that manipulation?" I said, "I wasn't crying with them. I was telling them my situation because that's called having emotions." I heard my dad chime in. "You can interpret it however you want, Zachary. But everyone sees you for who you really are now." I told them, "Okay, fine. Say whatever you want to everyone. I'm tired of trying to explain it." And I hung up. I thought hanging up would give me some peace. But it didn't. Over the next week, the rumors only got worse. One relative said they heard I threatened to cut off Grandma and Grandpa if they didn't give me money. Another said I bragged about how I manipulated them and laughed about it afterward. I felt like I was losing my mind. I mean, how do you fight something like that? It's so absurd that it almost seems comical, except it's not funny when the people you care about start believing it. One day, my cousin Bernard, yes, that cousin, actually called me. He said, "Hey man, I know things are complicated right now, but do you think you could talk to Uncle and Aunt and sort this out?" I said, "There's nothing to sort out, Bernard. They know the truth. They're just choosing to ignore it." I texted my parents. "I can't do this anymore. You've made the choice to spread these lies, and I can't keep trying to convince you otherwise. I'm going to step away from this relationship for now. I love you both, but I can't keep letting this hurt me." And that was it. I blocked them on social media because they were posting passive-aggressive stuff about me. I stopped responding to family members who clearly were just looking for gossip. I'm in a weird place right now. If anything happens, I'll keep you updated. Update 2, a lot of time has passed. I wish I could come back with better news, but life doesn't always give you good news. My grandfather passed away last month. The only good thing I can say about it is that he passed away peacefully in his sleep. In some ways, it was peaceful, but man, it still hit me like a ton of bricks. I don't need to explain in this update how important she has been to me. And I'm not talking about the money, but about the support and the example she set as a person. As soon as I got the news, I packed a bag and drove straight to my grandmother's house. She looked so small and frail when I walked in, but she still managed a weak smile and a hug. I don't think I've ever hugged someone so tightly in my life. Organizing the funeral was difficult, but I needed to do it for my grandmother. My parents were there too, and while we were civil, there was this strange tension in the air. Like we all knew there were unresolved issues, but no one had the energy to address them in the midst of mourning. The funeral itself was beautiful, honestly. Hundreds of people attended. My grandfather was one of those genuinely good souls, and seeing how many lives he touched was overwhelming. Old business partners, childhood friends, neighbors. People came from all over to pay their respects. I tried to hold it together during the eulogy, but man, I broke down halfway through. My grandmother held my hand the whole time, and I'm so grateful she was there because I don't think I could have made it through otherwise. Now, here's where things got a little complicated. My grandfather wasn't incredibly wealthy or anything, but he owned some property, including a beautiful house on the lake. It's the kind of place you see in postcards. A wooden dock, big windows overlooking the water, surrounded by trees. My dad spent a lot of time there as a kid, and even I have memories of running around the dock, fishing with my grandpa, and roasting marshmallows by the fire. So, during the reading of the will, the lawyer started listing the assets. And then we got to the lake house. My grandfather left it to me and my cousin Laura. For context, Laura is my dad's sister's daughter. She's honestly great, someone I get along with well. But the moment my dad heard the words, "Zachary and Laura will share ownership of the lake house," I swear I saw his jaw clench. He didn't say anything then, but his face said it all. He was furious. Like, really furious. After the reading, he left without saying a word to me. My mom followed him, and I just sat there awkwardly with Laura and my grandmother. For the next few days, while I stayed with my grandmother, my dad completely avoided me. If we were in the same room, he acted like I was invisible. My mom gave me these weird half smiles, but she didn't say much either. It's unbelievable to me because it's not like I asked for the lake house. I didn't even know my grandfather was going to leave it to me. But somehow, I felt like my dad saw it as another personal attack, like my grandfather was taking my side in some imaginary war. Laura and I talked about it one night while we were having tea. She admitted she felt uncomfortable too because her mom, my dad's sister, wasn't exactly happy with the will either. But at least Laura's mom didn't act cold. One afternoon, while I was helping my grandmother sort through some of my grandfather's old things, she sat down with me. She said, "Your grandfather loved your father very much, Zachary. But he also saw how hard you worked, how much you struggled to prove yourself. He wanted you to have something that meant a lot to him." I think she knew I felt guilty about the whole situation, like I had unintentionally caused an even bigger rift between my dad and me. But my grandmother said something that stuck with me. "Your grandfather wasn't taking sides. He was choosing love. I loved you and I love Laura. That's why I wanted both of you to have a place where you could always feel close to him." The night before we went home, I ran into my dad in the kitchen. He was making tea and I was filling a glass with water. For a moment, there was silence. Neither of us said anything, but then he spoke. "You know, that lake house was supposed to stay in the family. It was supposed to be ours." I replied, "It still is, Dad. I'm not going to sell it. I'm not going to turn it into a rental property. It's still ours." He didn't answer. He just stirred his tea, dropped the spoon, and left. Update 3. There are some things I need to address now, since my father has decided to sue me. He believes the lake house belongs to him, even though my grandfather left it to me and my cousin Laura. I can't talk much about the details because it's very complicated and legal, but I'll try to give you an idea of what's happening. It all started when my dad started showing up at my house unannounced, demanding that I give him the lake house. At first, I thought he was just upset and wanted to talk. But when I refused to give in, he started making threats. He told me that my grandfather's will was invalid and that I was wrong for not sharing the house with him. It was like a switch had been flipped in him. Then the legal documents arrived. I won't go into details, but basically my dad's legal team sent me official documents accusing me of wrongfully obtaining the lake house and demanding that I hand it over. He claims it's his inheritance, not mine, and that I manipulated my grandfather into leaving it to me. It's ridiculous, right? My grandfather clearly left the house to Laura and me. My mom keeps trying to mediate, trying to convince me to give in and just give the house to my dad so we can move on. I'm at a point where I don't think there's any going back. I don't think we can ever repair what's been broken. I don't think you'll get any updates from me during this time, at least until everything settles down and I can give you more details about everything. Update 4. This update comes much later than the last one, and believe me, I would have liked it to come sooner. Precisely because that would have meant the whole lawsuit with my father was over sooner. But it wasn't until now that I can talk to you freely about everything that has happened. Well, no. My father couldn't invalidate my grandfather's will and get the house, which would have been perfect for him, as I'll explain later. The lawsuit should have been fairly short, really. But my father had good lawyers, at least when it came to delaying things, and it dragged on longer than usual. I think he expected me to finally give up and tell him the house was his. Something I couldn't have done anyway because it also belongs to my cousin. But not even my aunt joined in on my father's crusade. And when my grandmother told me that my grandfather really wanted me to have it, I couldn't give up. Luckily, my grandmother's testimony was useful for the trial, since my father had nothing, absolutely nothing. The only thing he's done is spend an enormous amount of money on lawyers, but he also managed to get me to spend money. But if there's one good thing about everything he did to me, it's that, in addition to spreading his rhetoric that I had manipulated my grandfather to the family, he also spread it to other people, to the point that it was affecting my business. So we played a game of chess and sued him for defamation and damages. I don't know the value of the house my grandfather left us because we haven't had it appraised since we don't want to sell it. But I'm sure what he spent on lawyers and what he had to pay for my lawsuit, which I won, was much more expensive. Yes, we're talking about that kind of amount. And this is particularly bad for my father, because part of his obsession with my grandfather's house wasn't the memories. He wanted to make money from it. He planned to get it and then sell it. That is, my grandfather's body wasn't even cold yet, and he was already arguing about the inheritance because he needed the money. The reason for this is that the money he lent my cousin, along with subsequent loans, left him in a precarious financial position. And the fight with me made it even worse, although he can't blame anyone but himself since he brought it on himself. He could have used the money he spent on lawyers to pay off the debt, and he would still have some financial stability. My parents had to sell their house, part of the money they used to pay for my lawsuit and the rest to cover other debts. They have been really hard hit financially by that bad investment. They still have my father's business, which, as far as I know, is profitable. However, he has been looking to sell part of it to ease some of the debt. Someone in the family suggested that I buy it so the business stays in the family. But having my father as a business partner isn't exactly a tempting idea right now. Besides, it's not an industry I'm interested in, nor one where I could contribute with my skills. At least I know my father won't have the money to keep suing people for every little thing he thinks of. Update: my father sold part of his company to a family member. I thought some people who asked about this might find this information interesting,